Now, this is the regulatory perspective coming from the medicine sector, from European Medicines Agency, by Nino Mihokovic. He's a quality specialist at the EMA, a biologist by training by University of Zagreb, and he just flashed through pharmaceutical industry, and in 2013 went to join the EMA on the quality office, and he works currently in quality aspects of different types of medicinal products, from biotechnology-derived products, plasma-derived, chemical, and, very important for this session, live bacteria-containing products. Thank you, Nico, for coming in.
Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me to present here. To present the EMA's experience and perspective on microbiome-based medicinal products. And I will start with a disclaimer that this presentation lays out my views, which do not necessarily coincide with the views of the EMA or its scientific committees, and do not preempt any assessment. So I will start with introducing the EMA. I will highlight some regulatory and scientific challenges that we face with microbiome-based medicinal products. I will relate the EMA's experience. I will outline some avenues of support to innovation that you can use and EMA provides, and I will make some concluding remarks. The EMA works for over 500 million people in the European area, for which it authorizes and monitors medicines, and it is believed that some 27% of global sales of medicines transpire on to this patient population, so quite a large market. The EMA facilitates development and access to medicines by providing scientific advice to medicine developers. It evaluates the applications for marketing authorization applications on quality, safety, and efficacy side. Further, it monitors the safety of authorized medicines for pharmacovigilance activities, and it provides information on human and veterinary medicines to both healthcare professionals and patients. And this transparency topic is quite important for us. The EMA is organized, it encompasses a network of some 4,000 scientists across the European Economic Area and the European Union, and they are supported by the Secretariat of some 890 colleagues in London, so for now, and they are organized in 7 scientific committees and working parties. The main value of the European Medicines Agency is the European Medicines Regulatory Network, which is the national experts of over 4,000 experts from around Europe. And we are able to, once the specific type of medicine comes in for evaluation, we are able to tailor the assessment and evaluation teams based on the specific particularities of that product. And this is the main value that the European Medicines Agency provides to the quality and scientific basis for the assessment. The EMA is organized in these 7 main scientific committees, but it employs different working parties specialized either in specific disciplines or therapeutic areas. Medicines can come to the market in the EU via 2 different routes. They can use the centralized route via the EMA, or a national route by being authorized by specific member states using their national competent authority. And there is also variation to the national route called mutual recognition procedure and decentralized procedure. A centralized route through the EMA is mandatory for certain indications, so for treatments of HIV, cancer, diabetes, neurodegenerative diseases, autoimmune diseases, other viral diseases. So if there were some medicines being authorized in, for example, prevention of any neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's or Alzheimer, we would expect them to come through the centralized route. The same goes for diabetes, for example, which we heard some developments being made in microbiota field and progress. Further, centralized route is mandatory for medicines derived from biotechnological processes, which means recombinant technology. For advanced therapy medicinal products, gene therapy, cell therapy, tissue therapy, and orphan medicines, which are medicines for indications which occur in less than 5 people in 100,000. The benefit of the centralized procedure is that the single marketing authorization is given for all the member states. There is a centralized safety monitoring, and the product information is available to all the patients in all the languages. Now I will start moving on with the scientific and regulatory challenges that we encounter with microbiota type medicinal products. There are 3 types of products that we encounter. The first type is a single isolated strain-based product. Then we have multiple defined strains, and we have a fecal microbiota transplant therapy. And there is a number of challenges, mainly on chemical manufacturing and control side, that need to be tackled. And these usually pertain to characterization of live bacteria. So besides the genome characterization, we would expect some biochemical metabolics characterization. But what's important is to link the inherent variability of the live bacteria with the effect on safety and efficacy that it might carry. We are seeing some challenges on control strategy, on the creation and validation of specific analytical methods, because there aren't that many pharmacopoeial methods that can be used for control of such products. I mentioned that there needs to be established a link between the product quality and composition, its mechanism of action, and its potency and effectiveness, because potency assays are the best way to monitor the product's characteristics and its effectiveness through the life cycle. And I need to highlight that for fecal transplants, there are some challenges on the selection and testing of donors. Regarding the safety of the product, there is a theoretical risk of transfer of antibiotic-resistant genes from a product strain to the host microbiome, and this needs to be addressed. Now, unfortunately, I can't go into many technical details regarding this, because these are proprietary. These are based on scientific advice, which include proprietary information from the applicants. When it comes to regulatory challenges, the main problem is that there is no harmonized view regarding classification of products containing live bacteria, either in the isolated strain or as a fecal transplantation therapy, because these products could potentially be classified as medicinal products, as medical devices, or food supplements. But this depends on their objective characteristics. It depends on the intended treatment claim or mechanism of action. And what we can advise is to engage in the discussion with the regulators as early as possible, because the decisions will be made on a case-by-case basis, and as early as you have this agreement, this can be taken to fora where a harmonized position could be made and classification decided. So that's why either the agency, in case you are planning to develop medicines, either an agency or a national competent authority, so a health agency in a member state should be contacted. And also when it comes to the selection of donors for fecal microbiota transplant, the European Commission should be involved, because they tackle certain safety aspects pertaining to transmission of diseases. When it comes to EMA experience, it is very limited. In the last few years, we have had several interactions with the EMA's Innovation Task Force. Innovation Task Force is a platform that is open to anybody. You can use it. It connects the relevant experts from the European network with the applicants, so you can ask a question on any aspect of the development of a medicinal product, on a method. It doesn't need to be product specific, it can be platform specific, method specific. The applicants come and we provide them with our views and connect them with the experts for their views. What is more official and binding is the CHMP scientific advice. So this is a formal procedure where you submit a documentation package, the EMA discusses it with all the member states, and a harmonized view is given on scientific aspects of quality, safety and efficacy, but also some regulatory questions can be asked within this procedure. And at present, we don't have any medicinal products registered that are containing live bacteria through the centralized route. And consequently, there isn't any plan for guidance being drafted, because guidance is usually drafted based on certain experience, which is then codified and helps applicants in further applications and development. When it comes to EMA's support to innovation, what would be most relevant for you would be the Innovation Task Force, which can be approached and contacted at any time. Like I said, it joins the applicants, interested parties, which can be either from academia or companies, with the relevant experts in the European regulatory field. The other point which would be most relevant for you would be the scientific advice, and this is the main procedure for providing scientific input into the development stage of the medicines. And I would just like to conclude by highlighting again the importance of proactivity and early dialogue with the regulatory authorities. So at any stage of the product development, you can approach us and we can discuss which platform would be most convenient for you and to seek agreement based on the stage of your development. I will have my email in the contacts, and you can also ask me for any clarification regarding this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nico, so you could join us. And I would open the two aspects for discussion. And if I don't see hands, I would start by breaking the ice. And, well, from both presentations, I would say it's very interesting what these microbiome discussions are bringing. So, based on the challenges that, or the contributions by EMA and possibly by EFSA also, my question to you is this a field where, let's start with the classification, because sometimes making the analogy with advanced therapies, sometimes that's the first question that applicants put. I have this product, is it a advanced therapy, is it whatever? So now, I have this product, is it a food, is it to be classified as a food whatever component, or is it to be classified as a medicinal product? To whom should an applicant address the question? To both agencies at the same time? To EMA first, to EFSA first? Or is there a new ground being opened here for joint advice between EFSA and EMA, which in my experience, at least in the past, I never saw. So, yeah.
In our case, are the risk managers. This means the Commission and the Member States, the ones who decide on that, on the classification. It's not EFSA. EFSA only does a scientific assessment of the mandates that the Commission and Member States submit to EFSA. It's not our decision. Once we receive something, we evaluate this application under the regulation of foods that is in place.
Okay.
So from the EMA side, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. The responsible bodies for classification of the medicinal products or the medical devices would be the national competent authorities. So the national agencies in the member state, for example, where you are established or which you would like to approach. So because the clinical trials applications are also authorized not at the EMA level, but they are authorized by the national competent authorities, it would be good to consider applying to a single national competent authority. So that would be, for example, MHRA in UK or BfArM in Germany. Because this will be the body that will authorize a clinical trial on their area, so it would be good to approach them with the request for classification as well. But we can, the legislation for medicinal products is clear that it says that any substance having properties for treating or prevention of disease in human beings should be considered a medicinal product, and exerting a pharmacological, immunological or metabolic action classifies the substance as a medicinal product. So how the EMA can help is there is a large gray area of what would be more beneficial to you, and depending on your indication and the claim of treatment, whether a medicinal product would be more beneficial, which then implies a lot of investment in development, in clinical development, in quality development, or food additive. But this is, again, a case-by-case basis, and national competence authorities should be responsible. What the EMA can provide, we can provide a scientific input on your development program, and we can provide this regulatory advice. But since this is legally not within our remit, this is something that the national competence authorities would need to adhere to.
Okay, so that means we should, anyone who is starting a project in this area should start by national competent authority, maybe on their,
In both cases.
Medicinal product
in both cases. That's not very easy. Professor, just go.
Thank you for this very illuminating presentations, and which I find really reassuring is that the framework is being put in place. I mean, it's reassuring for what we can do. Now, I'd like to expose you to a scenario, just reacting to what you just said. Suppose I was to work with a company who wants to produce cookies which are reinforced in fiber and can increase the richness of the microbiota. Whom do I... No, increase in richness means reducing inflammation and impacting all sorts of things. Where do I go shopping to get my product approved easiest?
I don't believe that, may I take this? I don't believe that the increase in, biodiversity of microbiota would classify as preventing disease in human beings. Today. But yeah, what we need is a scientifically founded study. So we would need a study that would prove a clinical trial, which would prove that that this does indeed prevent disease. So if the clinical trial is there, I don't see why not have it as a medicinal product.
Well, I would say the same. This is clearly a food. The only point is that the end point you are mentioning, the richness of diversity of the microbiota has not been yet conclusively linked to a healthy status, so prevention of disease. So we need more science behind this concept to really prove that there is a contribution of a causal relationship.
Thank you.
So if IMI could do a project that would help you in your decision making, what sort of data and what sort of information would you like that project to deliver? I didn't think it was going to be that difficult a question.
Yes, we are of course driven by the applicants and their development programs. So what we are hoping to do with the IMI is to reduce the asymmetry of knowledge in the system and try to try to make people aware of the regulatory platforms that are already available. So what I believe needs to be done is there needs to be a communication between the developers and the IMI in order to suss out certain aspects that would benefit from further looking into, and then this would then be, because there are certain challenges that are inhibiting these products from coming to the market. But the key drivers are the applicants. So the applicants need to come together with IMI and determine which are these challenges, how can they be best tackled, and the EMA is there to provide scientific support and to provide, for example, scientific advice on clinical trial, on the design of the clinical trial. So already, so if you engage with the applicant early, you tackle the scientific challenges, this would streamline the coming to the market.
I was thinking more along the lines of, you mentioned CMC is very important, so standardization of analytical methods, controls, you know, an accepted industry approach, you know, is that something that would help all the applicants? Because we can't really work on an applicant on an individual basis. We have to try to find those areas where we can advance our understanding and knowledge. And I was just wondering, are there areas where a harmonized approach would actually help set baselines for the regulators?
It's difficult to say because every individual development program is different and they face their own challenges, and what's helpful for one applicant is not helpful for another. So that's why it's really difficult to quantify this, and that's why communication is so important to progress this topic.
We have, if I may, we have a question coming from, is it web? A web question, let's say. It's a question from to Nino, for Nino. Why have no bacterial product been approved? And is that because there are no applications? And then we continue.
Yes, we didn't have any applications.
Not yet.
Not yet. And if you see, there is a European clinical trials database, which outlines the protocols and public available data relating to clinical trials, and you will see that there is a number of studies in the phase 2, phase 1, but only a couple of studies, I think maybe one in phase 3, or not even a single one. So we lack the stage of development, the maturity of projects, and the marketing authorization applications. But I believe that there are no regulatory obstacles to approving microbiome-based medicinal product. Because for the approval and the assessment of medicinal products, what's key is the risk-benefit ratio, and if the benefit is there, then the regulatory routes will be worked on to get this to the patients.
Yes?
Yes. Maybe a question for Professor Sanz. There seems to be large differences in labeling laws between continents, between the US, Europe, and China, and so on. In the US and China, we see a lot of new products, food products, labeled with probiotics and so on, which is not possible today in Europe. Could you comment on the differences between regulations from one region to another, and how it could affect the innovation and the development in that field?
Well, I understand this is a problem for the developments in the field, for those dedicated to the business, but the situation is the one we have in place. We can do not much about it. The European legislation is more protective towards consumers, but also towards industry, I think. The claims that are approved can be used without any further problems. While in US you can make claims, this is called structural and functional claims without the FDA approval, but you are exposed to other companies or associations that claim that your claims, your messages are not true, or are not reliable, and you can be injured also because of that. So it's a different system that gives you more freedom in this way, but on the other hand gives you also less protection. And there are also differences in the definition of food supplements in Europe and in US. In US, supplements are not foods, while in Europe, foods and food supplements are foods. And this makes a rather huge difference.
Thank you for your talks, and I have actually tons of questions, but I'll try to keep it simple and put it into one concise package. The regulations are clear, yet the bugs are not, right? So we're dealing with probiotics, we're dealing with bacteria that produce all kinds of goodies that may affect multiple diseases, that may affect multiple health issues. So it's going to be very difficult to make a medicine aimed towards one particular indication, in my view. So here we have a field that goes in between food and pharma. So it's very difficult to define where we're going to go. And also, there is a big difference on the production levels. I think that people will be having problems with, or at least have concerns about, if you produce probiotics in the food manufacturing. It is restricted to, of course, certain safety and production regulations. When you go into medicines, that all of a sudden becomes much more strict, much more different. You cannot really apply the same regulations for protein purification, for instance, to a bacterium that you grow in a fermenter. So isn't there a time that we start thinking about a category where we fit in live bacterial products? We've been talking also, for instance, medical devices. That regulation is now out. Mm-hmm. You cannot use bacteria for medical devices anymore. So you see, the regulations are there, but they seem to be non-fitting. Food for special medical purposes will have to be nutritional value. Well, the nutritional value could be maybe not what we eat, but what the microbiota produces, like butyrate. So maybe we should really consider this as an alternative field that we have to design new regulations for. Maybe you can comment on this.
Well, in general, I agree fully with you that it will be better to have an harmonized way of evaluating such products, also in terms of safety, not only in terms of efficacy. But we have to consider also that the application matters, because if you are developing a product that is intended for disease subjects, they have more risk than healthy subjects or subjects that have suboptimal health. So safety considerations, I think, that will vary, not depending on the product itself, but depending on the use you want to do of the product.
Also, the scientific guideline requirements for medicinal products are flexible, and there is a degree of justification, scientific justification, that you can provide in order not to be able to comply with all the specific requirements. So guidelines are there only as a guide, and deviation can be is envisaged, and this is why this scientific advice is quite important to establish this dialogue. And developing a new set of legislation could be cost prohibitive, and it also could be onerous to certain type of products, which would maybe need to comply with higher requirements, and this would stop them from coming on the market as a lower category, for example.
We have 2 questions. Then I think that we will end up the session with the answers, and we should be finishing now. So one is for Professor Sanz. Are the three risk factors you mentioned the only ones approved by EFSA? What would be needed to submit and/or validate other risk factors? Somehow this comes in line to the discussion previously. So.
Well, the factors that we say that have been validated in the EFSA documents is because we have evaluated applications addressing these risk factors. This does not mean that there are others that perhaps are validated in-house. What I'm talking about is only about the applications we have evaluated so far. And the difficulty is that you have to show in longitudinal studies that risk factor is an independent predictor of the disease development. And to do so, you need to use large cohorts of subjects. Some will develop the disease, some others will not develop the disease. You should follow up the dynamics of these subjects for a long time, and then identify and validate which are the risk factors that can contribute to the disease onset. And you also have to provide a rationale or evidence that modulating this factor, this means inducing a modification that can be an increase or a decrease, really you can't change the disease outcome. And this is a matter of long-term studies, and this is costly. Although I must say also that with the omics technologies, we have now a very good opportunity to work in this area in a much more efficient manner.
So thank you, Yolanda. And I think that the last one is for Nino. What is the current regulation for probiotic products? I suppose it's for Nino, I don't know. For probiotic products that support vaginal health, are there differences in case of 1, vaginal, and 2, oral application? So please, if you think it's for you also.
So this would again depend on the characteristics of the product and the intended treatment. I believe that there are currently some products on the market authorized as medical devices in certain member states, but we have seen in clinical trials, for example, for vaginosis, so that is moving towards medicinal products. Again, depends on the indication, on the scientific evidence to support the effectiveness and the safety. And the differences would be, as in any medicines, it's very important. It is always a risk-benefit decision. And the good thing about probiotics is that in most of the cases the risks are quite low. So this is what also plays into this argument. So that is hopefully what will help us see more of these products.
Who regulates probiotics? Is EFSA or EMA or both or none?
It depends of its effect.
It depends.
It depends.
On the indication?
Yes.
Yeah. So it could go one way or the other. But vaginal probiotics?
Well, in this case, I would like to say that we have also evaluated a claim on this application, and was negative, finally, the conclusion, because part of the studies were done by vaginal administration. So we need to exclude these studies because it was not making sense for us.
Yeah.
So only in those cases that the administration was via oral, we will consider the set of studies.
So that's a good thing. Oral food should be oral.
Yes.
Oh, parenteral, but not vaginal. Okay. I think, thank you so much to the panel, and thank you to the audience for staying.